The City of Phoenix holds community budget hearings throughout April, allowing residents to comment and make suggestions on the city manager's trial budget before final decisions are made. This public discussion is among the reasons the city's budget so closely matches the community's highest priorities each fiscal year.
I'm here with Deputy City Manager Karen. And see, they are the friendliest crowd. They wave back to you, Karen.
I love it.
And so she's going to kind of go over some of the logistics, and then we'll start taking testimony. And I just want to let you know, we are taking copious notes. We're actually taping this as well, so that we get all your responses. And so after we've had all the budget hearings, I think this is the last one.
This is the last one.
So. Lucky, yeah. So after that, we're going to sit down and go through some of the comments with the city manager and the city manager's office. We do take to heart what you're saying, and we really have had a lot of positive comments this go around. So it's a good way for me to start off as council person. Thank you. So let's turn it over to Karen, and then we'll get started.
Okay. Good evening, welcome. Thank you all for being here tonight. I am Karen Peters, Deputy City Manager, and the first thing I'd like to do is introduce our interpreter for the evening, Ana Arvayo, in the back of the room. If anyone needs translation services, she's here to help you out. So, see Ana. Let me just go over a couple of very introductory comments. What we're talking about tonight is the trial budget. This process is intended to get public input before the manager then takes that input, refines the trial budget, and then presents the revised version back to the council on May 9th, I believe is the date that we'll be doing. This is the last of 17 hearings. And they're all pretty much the same. I think a few of you have been to one or two already.
They're groupies.
Right. If you haven't already, please pick up the budget tabloid, which is the neat little pamphlet that I have here somewhere, but they're on the back table. And that will tell you a little bit about this year's budget and how it has been assembled. We will be, as the councilwoman said, we're taping, we're taking notes, we'll be keeping track of all the things that you say. Please fill out a speaker card. Those are also at the back table if you'd like to provide comments. You'll be coming up to the mic so that the camera so that the recording can capture your comments, and you'll have a few minutes to speak. We will want to keep everybody to 3 minutes or less if that's possible. So the first thing that happens at this meeting is that we provide a brief overview of the budget in a video. And so we'll do that, and then we'll get to public comments. So without any further discussion, let's roll the video.
Get out of the way.
Hello everyone, and welcome to your first look at the City of Phoenix 2017-18 trial budget. The City of Phoenix wants to hear from you. Your ideas can help shape the budget each year. The final budget provides the plan for how the city will spend taxpayer money on key services you want and need, like police, fire, transit, city parks and swimming pools, libraries, youth and education, graffiti prevention, arts and culture, and help for seniors, and how they all could be impacted. The 2017-18 Phoenix City budget is balanced as required by state law and city charter. In this trial budget, the city is preserving the services our residents value. Out of the $1.2 billion general fund budget, there is a small $1.9 million surplus. This video will present proposals on how to use these funds. So here's how the city's budget breaks down. There are three sources: the general fund, enterprise fund, and special revenue fund. Let's start with the general fund. 3/4 of the general fund is for police, fire, courts, with the remaining 25% going for everything else like libraries, parks, senior services, arts, and administrative and support functions. Enterprise fund departments include aviation, water services, solid waste services, and the convention center. Special revenue funds come mostly from dedicated taxes that must be used for a specific purpose. For example, the Phoenix Parks and Preserves Initiative, also called 3PI, or Transportation 2050. That funding goes for transit, light rail, and streets. Under the strong leadership of the mayor and city council, we are glad to say the budget is balanced. Phoenix employees strive every day to work smarter, save money, and serve our customers. That includes making sound financial decisions, like keeping our credit rating strong, spending within our means, and looking for savings to use for important community services. Now let's take a look at the recommendations for additions to the budget for next fiscal year. In the general fund, there is a little less than $2 million extra, plus some opportunities to use funds differently to add service. First, adding 16 civilian police assistants. They will take over some administrative duties, freeing up officers so the officers can respond to emergency calls.
So adding police assistance to our existing staffing resources is going to do a couple of things. It's going to get our first responders back on those priority calls for service faster and increase our service delivery to our community.
Next, focusing on homelessness in our city. The plan is to create more outreach teams by eliminating 6 vacant positions in the Human Services Department. This would free up about $500,000 to send teams of outreach workers to homeless residents on the street to connect them with services and a place for shelter.
These services are critical to the city. These professional outreach teams will work hand in hand with our community partners, neighborhoods, police, to bring these really important services to a very vulnerable population.
For the library, there are 2 recommendations. Contract savings would make security at Burton Bar Central Library permanent, and the other is to create more opportunities to engage kids in educational programs. Now, that leaves about 1/3 of the surplus untouched. So the proposed budget calls for strategically setting aside that funding, about $641,000, into a rainy day fund. The intent is to offset a potential deficit in the 2018-19 budget, which was projected in the city's 5-year forecast. Okay, time now to get back to the 2017-18 budget proposals. Let's look at the enterprise funds. These services are funded with user fees, with the exception of the Phoenix Convention Center. The budget calls for putting a new emergency operations center and ambulance at Sky Harbor International Airport. This would ensure that if anyone at the airport needs medical attention, they can get to the hospital quickly from Sky Harbor. Next, the solid waste funds pays for our trash collection and recycling services. It's proposed to add 8 positions to enhance worker safety and increase collections. Perhaps you've heard of the Reimagine Phoenix campaign? This is all part of support for the goal from mayor and council to divert 40% of what ends up in our landfills by the year 2020 through recycling, composting, and education. Okay, now to other restricted funds, which are dedicated to specific services. The Phoenix Parks and Preserve Initiative Fund comes from a 1/10 tax to support our world-renowned parks system. To support safe use of our parks and preserve system and public safety, the trial budget would add 22 new park rangers. This would extend trailhead hours and provide additional support at flatland parks around the city.
By adding rangers, we can extend the park hours at specific locations by 2 additional hours, which means that instead of hiking in the heat of the day, you can hike a little bit later. You can drive actually into the trailhead and continue your hiking later in the evening while it's still a little bit cooler.
13 of the new park rangers would be assigned to the city's more heavily visited locations, including North Mountain, Piestewa Peak, South Mountain, and other trailheads like Echo Canyon, Cholla, and Lookout Mountain. The other 9 would be assigned to flatland parks.
Additional rangers in our community and flatland parks provide that extra layer of customer service that we currently don't have. And it'll provide an opportunity for people to get education or learn more about what's going on in the parks and just provide that extra layer of enhanced customer service.
Also included would be funding to maintain 2 new dog parks, one at Reach 11 and the other at Deer Valley Park. From the Transportation 2050 funds, the budget calls for expanding service on some of the busiest routes around the city. It would also increase weekday, midday frequency on routes serving Thomas and Camelback roads. And from the Development Services Fund, the proposal is to add several positions to keep up with increased building permits and inspections due to economic growth. Also, to increase and enhance communication and continue our efforts to streamline processes. One last important update is on the hiring of more police officers and firefighters. The city is on target to meet its recruiting goals of 3,125 officers and 1,615 firefighters.
This budget that we're talking about now includes the addition of roughly 250 officers next year, getting us to our sustainable goal.
So it's important for us to keep the public safe and live within our means. In 2009, our public safety fund was significantly in a deficit. To avoid layoffs and to balance the budget, we stopped hiring. By 2015, we were back. We've been hiring police officers and firefighters since then.
While we're down from our peak level of staffing in the police department, we're also significantly down in our calls for service to the department. Over the last few years, as population and calls for service have increased, we are also fortunate to return to hiring officers.
So we've been recruiting in-state for a long time, but now we have that extra effort to be able to go out-state to recruit. What an amazing opportunity to increase the number of people that we find and can look for to build our staffing here in the Phoenix Police Department.
It allows a safe, effective response to whatever emergency is happening in the city of Phoenix. So whether it's a heart attack, if it's a house fire, structure fire, if it's a mountain rescue, so by having 4-person staffing, it ensures adequate, safe response to meet whatever needs we encounter.
Now keep in mind, this year's budget hasn't been adopted just yet. Your input is important, and the City of Phoenix wants to hear from you on what the upcoming budget should look like. So to recap a few highlights, the 2017-18 trial budget calls for 16 new police assistants to free up sworn officers from administrative work, 22 park rangers, which would allow some trailheads to be open longer during the summer, and reutilizing city resources to expand the city's homeless outreach.
Again, this is a balanced budget with some money set aside as a head start for future use.
17 public hearings will take place this month across all council districts, and you are encouraged to attend. Make sure you pick up a budget pamphlet outlining all the proposals and options at any of the public meetings or online at phoenix.gov/budget. You can also send your comments or questions to budget.research@phoenix.gov, or to reach us by phone, please call 602-262-4800. You can also comment on social media by using #PhoenixBudget. Thank you for your interest in the City of Phoenix budget and being a part of the budget process. Sure.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hi. Okay, I just wanted to acknowledge we have a staff from a number of city departments here tonight, and so if you have any questions, someone in the audience may be able to answer specifically. Also wanted to acknowledge that the mayor's office is represented here this evening, Robbie Sherwood, right here in the front. So with that, again, if you'd like to provide a comment, please fill out a speaker card, and I'll turn it back over to Councilwoman Stark.
Okay, let's get started. Jean Blue.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Stark and Karen. It's good to see you again. And to show appreciation for all of the city staff who are here and really do an outstanding job. I have been working with the City of Phoenix on a number of projects, and I laud the the trial budget for its inclusion of services in transit, as well as for our public safety, police and fire. We have been and continue to support the public safety aspects of our city, knowing that even with the additions that are being projected here, we're still far from the 3,125, I think it is, goal that we have. There was one area in the budget that I would urge that the city manager and city council seriously consider, and that is children and teen services. There's very little mention in this trial budget about the youth of our community. And although the OGs like myself certainly appreciate the assignment of dollars and people, we have to, in all good conscience and in planning, really look at the leaders of tomorrow as well. And the youth in our city, across the city, are not mentioned, I don't think, forcefully or significantly enough in this trial budget. To hear a surplus is really different, and it's marvelous. And the number of years that I've been working with the city, I could hear that we have a surplus is great, and certainly everyone's got their ideas on how to use the surplus. I would ask that you please consider in your deliberations some funds for youth, some additional funds for youth, not just eliminating a 0.6, I think it is, position in the library, but rather some funds for youth activities. We've been doing youth services for a number of years. This year, as a matter of fact, the OIC, Opportunities OIC, where I work, we will be blessed to celebrate 50 years of service to this city. Each one of those years, we have dealt with unemployed, underemployed, economically disadvantaged youth and adults. Last year, we had a pilot project without city funding that addressed youth in the 13, 14, and 15 age bracket. We did receive some private funding and were able to do that program. We're trying to get it underway again. Let me share with you that 13, 14, and 15-year-olds today are going to be voting in just a couple of years, and they're going to be running our city. Of the folks that we only had funds to do 25 in that category. None dropped out. Every one of them completed the program on their time during the summer, and some of the folks who were employed in the private and public sector are still working today. So there's hope, and that's, we think, clear evidence of the fact that young folks, 13, 14, and 15, can work, want to work, and need the training. Certainly we'll be doing and participating with the city on the STEM activity, but we need also to deal with these youth and preparing them for the world of work. Please consider some additional dollars for our youth and working with them. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you so much for having all these hearings. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lewis Howley, and as you're coming up, I just want to note that our city manager, Ed Zucker, just arrived. Hi, Ed. Take it away.
Hello, I'm Lewis Howley. I'll get my mic set up. I am the president of the Friends of the Acacia Library, which is just down the street at 750 East Townley. I like to say that the Acacia Library is small but mighty in its impact on the community. Our Friends group provided over $6,000 in budgeted funds this year for additional programming at the library. And our most recent project that we're engaged in is our seed library, where people can come and select from over 50 different kinds of seeds for herbs and vegetables, and a few fruit as well. And my colleagues at Mesquite Library had implemented their seed library long ago. This is kind of new territory for libraries, but we're checking out 30 packets of seeds a day. We have teachers checking out seeds to use with their students. We have children asking their parents if they can check out seeds and grow things. And we have customers coming in and showing pictures of the things they've grown. And I also want to thank the city and the library for providing Acacia Branch with an electronic calendar of events display, which has been a long time coming to the library, and we do appreciate that. And I want to make a pitch for extended library hours for all our libraries in the city. In Acacia's case, we're closed on Sundays and Mondays, and those are days when customers could come and use our resources. Those resources sitting idle for those 2 days are underutilized, and it would be advantageous to be able to serve the community on those 2 days as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a speaker card here, but they wish not to speak. That's Gail Helm. And interests and comments are transient, drug addicts, making Sunny Slope their home, leaving trash, needles everywhere. Thank you for your comments. And as you know, our police are here tonight as well, so if you have any additional comments you may want to make to them. The next speaker is Letitia Clark. Again, she does not want to speak, but she does want to talk. She wants to note the issues with transients and crime and homelessness. Mark Jacobson, come on up. And
I can speak from here.
do you want me to we can bring it to you. I know you have a loud voice, but yeah, we need to get it for the record.
Thank you. I want to for having this meeting, for giving us a chance to give some input into how our tax money is spent. I live due south of here, almost exactly straight south, not very far. The primary thing I want to talk about is the number of people that are living everywhere, except in houses. I would ask that the city council change your verbiage when you talk about this and print things about this. We're not facing a homeless issue. These people are not homeless in the truest sense. They choose to live on the street. These are not transients. Anybody can be a transient. A retired person in a $1 million motorhome can live a transient lifestyle in tour. Unfortunately, they're drug addicts. The vast majority of the people we see sleeping everywhere, defecating in people's driveways, they're in the park right this minute, right 100 yards from here. Carlos Jr., he's been trying for a month. The police have their hands tied. We have our hands tied. It's absolutely ridiculous what the neighbors are forced to try and do to make a difference in this neighborhood. I get out on this thing when I can. I've been riding under the underpasses, 7th Street to 19th Avenue, just for something to do. I've made 4 trips. The underpasses. I just want to show you something. That's what I picked up. Those are 10 heroin needles. I'll put them back. I don't want to scare them tonight. The Parks Department supervisor who was down here about 4 days ago cleaning up after one of our local guys set up camp, 37 needles from one man under his blanket of junk. We need to start calling it what it is. It's not homelessness. That's a very pretty buzzword that people have adopted to make it sound more palatable to everybody. They're not homeless, they're drug addicts. I'm sorry, we need to call it what it is. They are incapable of helping themselves for the most part. They will not take help. They don't want help, they want drugs. They want to get high and they want drugs. They'll do anything, they'll steal anything from anybody, and most people who live around here can testify to that. I live right next to the bike path, 20 feet. I see them in the morning at 2 or 3 o'clock when I hear noises going up and down the bike path, hauling stolen bicycles. Houses got broken into. Most of my neighbors terrified. And unfortunately, the signage that we're supposed to put up, nobody can even tell us what to put up. The sign has to be a certain size, a certain thickness, a certain color. The letters have to be a certain height. They have to have the certain words on it. And then we have to get the business to cough up all the money and go to court to prosecute them if they're caught, only at night on the property when everybody's home asleep. Well, we have to go out and patrol and make a difference and call the police. I'm sorry, to not show up most of the time. or to take 30, 40 minutes to an hour. I had 9 hours on one call. This is ridiculous. We've got to call it what it is, and I resent the fact that my tax money is going to be spent to give more, as you call it, expand the homeless outreach. They're not homeless. They're drug addicts. We need to get rid of the drug dealers. The addicts will move on. They have no choice. We can chase 100 addicts, or we can go after a half a dozen dealers. Get them out of the neighborhood. Everybody's going to go away. They know they're going to either die, get help, or leave. If you're going to put money somewhere, put it into enforcement of taking the dealers off the street. They're killing our kids, our young people, and our neighborhood. I hope you can do something about it, because we're losing the battle here at Sunny Slope. We're losing it real fast. And a lot of us are getting pretty scared. We're tired of it. We're tired of the rhetoric. We're tired of the runaround. Please help us make a difference.
Thank you. Next speaker card does not wish to speak with Judy Giles, and she's submitted a letter that deals with the arts and art maintenance. And she also points out the Grasshopper Bridge as an example of how we need to maintain our art and our culture. Next speaker is Justin Johnson.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for attending so many of these budget meetings, and thank you to staff. Thank you to City Manager Ed Zerker for working through this process. I know this is a long, lengthy process. I know you put countless hours in, and we really appreciate it as citizens. My name is Justin Johnson. I'm a home builder, but I'm also former North Fountain Village member. Hi, Martin. Good to see you over there. I currently serve on the Planning Commission. I'm the chairman of the Planning Commission, and I'm here today actually representing CAS. CAS is the Central Arizona Shelter Services. We are the largest shelter service actually in the region. We've been operating for over 30 years for what we believe is the gold standard for services here in Arizona for homelessness. And we're here today actually to ask for additional funding specific to CAS, an additional $400,000 to be exact. One of the things that we've realized throughout our time is the more beds we build, the more people that go into them. We could have 1,000 more beds tomorrow, we'll have 1,000 beds fulfilled. The biggest issue right now that we have at CAS, again being the biggest shelter, is we get people in those beds and they stay in those beds. And then we don't have enough room for the next people. The federal standard for the amount of caseworkers that a shelter should be able to offer is 30-1. And right now CAS is operating at 50-1 because we don't have the funding in place to be able to increase the caseworkers and have them helping folks get back on their feet. With the additional funding, we think that, we will be able to leverage that funding on a close to at least a 2-1 from a private fundraising. And our city budget right now and city funding that we have at CAS is about 15% of our total budget, between 13 and 15% of our total budget. So we try really hard to leverage that money, but allowing us to get more caseworkers in allows us the opportunity to get people through the door, help get them back on their feet, help put them in places where they're not out on the street, they're not sleeping in bus stops, they're not sleeping at Carl's Jr., they're not sleeping in our neighborhoods, they're getting acclimated back into society and helping get them back on their feet. So again, we appreciate the outreach effort that I think that city manager and council have put together of $500 million. Our concern is if they don't have a place to go and we don't have the ability to help get them back on their feet, they're just going to be back out there sooner or later. So thank you again for your time, and thanks everybody.
Thank you, Justin. Our next 3 speaker cards do not wish to speak, but they're in support of the libraries and looking forward to having them open every day. And that would be Gloria Palladino. Am I saying that right? Palladino, okay. Harold Mickelson and Sarah Laurent. You want to speak? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Oh, I apologize. It says yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for allowing me to do this. My name is Sarah Laurent. I'm a volunteer with Mesquite.
In the mic.
Volunteer with Mesquite Library. And the first time I went to Mesquite, it was on a Sunday. And I got in the parking lot and I couldn't find a parking place. The place was so busy. And that's the way Mesquite is. So I'm speaking on behalf, like all the rest of them, keeping the libraries open every day of the week. And I'm speaking on behalf of all the libraries. I'm there as a volunteer at least one day a week and sometimes more. So I see who's there. There's a cross section of the community. It's a place where people come together. And it's they have so much to offer to keep people off the streets, maybe, not doing drugs, maybe not doing crime. The classes, the programs, and most particularly the reading programs, the summer reading programs for kids, that's one of the best reasons for keeping the library open. Right now, all but 2 libraries are closed at least one day of the week. Some of them are closed twice, and the Sunday is particularly unfortunate because that's when parents can bring their kids. And when you have summer reading programs, it helps retain the learning that kids get from the previous year in school to the next year. Otherwise, they lose so much of it during the summer. It can be argued, and there are no definitive studies on this, but it can be argued that libraries reduce crime because education definitely reduces crime. The more educated a person is, the less likely they are to commit crimes. And if you go into your juvenile facilities and prisons, the literacy rate is very low, the education rate is low. So the engaging with books is the best antidote to boredom and to mischief. So once again, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you for keeping the library funding, and I'd like to plant a little seed in your mind for next year to keep full week funding, everyday funding for the libraries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Jim Welter. Welcome, Jim. Hi.
Thank you very much for this forum to be able to respond to the new budget. My name is Jim Welter. I'm the founder and executive director of Impact Phoenix. Our organization's mission is to be the go-to resource for people who are in crisis, to come alongside of them in a coordinated, collaborative, and a holistic manner to help them not only out of their immediate crisis, but into a sustainable lifestyle. With that, we have created a collaborative here in Sunny Slope, beginning from the faith community, from houses of worship, where we feel that we can be able to respond here locally in Sunny Slope to those individuals that are experiencing homelessness. I certainly am very much in favor of increasing the outreach teams of the City of Phoenix, because that will work very well with the initiative that we're working on here in Sunny Slope. With every outreach encounter, you obviously have to have a place for that person to go to, and so the initiative that we're working on, which has been tried and tested in 4 other communities around the valley, called iHelp, will be a place that the outreach teams can interact with. I mentioned in terms of our mission of Impact Phoenix, a key word is collaborative. And so on this journey to create this initiative, we've been working with Deputy Director Ryan Balch from Moises Gallegos department, and through her interaction with Commander Lopez and other key members of the police department, we've got the support of the City of Phoenix in terms of what we're doing. We've got support of Honor Health, who's here tonight with Eric Leto, with Honor Health and Desert Mission. Arizona at Work, which is a collaborative between City of Phoenix and Department of Economic Security in terms of being able an employment resource. Maricopa Integrated Healthcare System will be a huge help with us in terms of those individuals experiencing behavioral health issues or addictions issues. And so we really believe that this is a collaborative effort. And so Impact Phoenix, with the work of the houses of worship, will be putting together this initiative. And so I guess selfishly, I would like to be able to see some downstream funding to be able to to be able to support the efforts that the outreach teams are putting in there. And so one final point, the best practices of this type of a model has shown that it's about 1/5 of the cost of providing emergency lodging than a traditional shelter service. And so I think that's what's also attractive to a community, that because of the volunteers that we have, it's a much less costly approach to being able to work with the individuals experiencing homelessness and getting them back into productive society. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Craig Tripkin, former council member. Thank you for your service, and thank you for what you do now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilwoman. And I want to tell you, your constituents out here, you've held more budget hearings than any other council person has, and I've seen you at many of them, so thank you very much. I'm here representing Central Arizona Shelter Services, and I appreciate what the gentleman said about maybe homelessness sounding like too nice a word. There's no question that the homeless population is a difficult population to deal with. It's got many varied problems. Some people who merely had hard times, and usually we see them at the campus earlier rather than later. But then there's serious mental illness, and there is drug addiction. There's no question about that. Cass is the largest shelter in the state. Cass, as Mr. Johnson said, is really the gold standard of services. We are $200,000 underwater for next year, and that includes a 30% budget increase in our fundraising budget. So we are having great difficulties funding. The $200,000, we have two needs. One is $200,000. The other one is we need more caseworkers. Simply put, I'll give you a small statistic, a couple statistics. 10% of the people that we have at Cass are using 40% of our bed nights. That 10% doesn't get any casework. In fact, 45% of them are employed and have jobs. Have jobs or have disability income. So they've got income. It's difficult to find housing for them, but if we could get casework in front of that 10% of the people, we could free up 40% of our bed nights. I do think that I appreciate the outreach program. I applaud it. I think it's got to happen. I was a council person once, and I can't count the neighborhood meetings I went at that I heard these kind of comments. I heard plenty of them. And I think we have to be conscious of the fact that unless we have a place for people to go, we're going to be just blowing the leaves around. Our average length of stay is, 60% of the people that we see leave in under 3 weeks, and we don't see them again. They don't come back. But then there's that 10% that take up 40% of our bed nights. There is an absolutely direct correlation between a person's success. In fact, a person who receives intense casework is 5 times more likely to not be a recidivist. That's just the way it is. So length of stay, we need to free up beds. Length of stay goes down with more casework. Let me address one other piece which is sort of rumbling through the system right now, which is expansion of the downtown shelter, the Human Services campus downtown. That may or may not happen. I think it's going to depend on the city council. But the reality is, as Mr. Johnson said, we're going to be full anyway. And so we still need to provide casework. We do need to have MMIC on campus. We do need to have those services. The iHelp program is a great program. It's not going to address serious drug addiction, serious mental illness. People need it to be in an environment where they are really receiving more constant hands-on kind of approach. I think something Justin said, which I just want to repeat. 13% of our budget is city funding, just 13%. So we are doing everything we can to leverage the money to go to other cities. I am out in Mesa, Peoria, Avondale, all over the place. But the city of Phoenix is our most important partner, and we are not going to be able to address homelessness without strong support from the city of Phoenix. So I thank you very much, and thank you for everybody for listening to me.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Franklin Marino.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak. Yes, I'm going to speak to the audience. Just out of curiosity, how many residents do we have here? People are actually residents of the city? Quick show of hands. Okay, great. Most of the meetings I go to, unfortunately, we don't get enough citizens. They're usually city staff members. Anyway, my name is Franklin Marino, and what you're going to hear from me comes from three different perspectives. First and foremost, I'm a resident of the city of Phoenix. My wife and I own a home over in District 2 on the other side of the 51, around the PV Mall area. We pay taxes. Second, I'm a city employee. I've been with the Phoenix Police Department for over 22 years, spent the majority of my career wearing a uniform, driving a marked vehicle, answering one of these things, a police radio. I was the guy who showed up at your house or business when you called 911 or Crime Stop. I'm also the secretary of the Phoenix Law Enforcement Association, the union that represents your rank and file Phoenix police officers and detectives that are out there every day doing the heavy lifting, more with less, especially since, as you saw in the video, we didn't hire for 6 years. That was city leadership and city management's desire to balance the budget on the backs of police employees. And we've been suffering ever since. And more importantly, you, the citizens, who when you need police service, you're suffering. Response times are up immensely. Priority 1 call, emergency call, crime in progress, someone kicking your door, breaking into your car, robbing your business, domestic violence, sexual assault. Average response time, 7 minutes citywide. Okay, now that's just an average. When I came on 22 years ago, our goal was to be there in 5. And I can tell you that I've talked to my officers out in the field. Some response times are in upwards of 15 to 20 minutes. And one of the reasons for that is that because Phoenix has something very unique. We have a geographical footprint of 530 square miles. We go from Anthem to the Gila River Indian Reservation, Peoria, Glendale, Tolleson on the west, to Scottsdale, Tempe, and Chandler on the east. We have mountain ranges, we have a vast expanse of open desert, canals, rivers, and freeways, and that all adds to the mix. And right now, our patrol forces have once again had to do another rebid because we didn't have enough bodies in patrol. As a matter of fact, the police chief made a decision to pull detectives and officers out of specialty details. So again, like I said, you're paying on both ends, the front end on a response time, and then the back end because detectives can't keep up with the caseload. So, a couple of things to consider. Ahwatukee, 70,000 people. At any given time, maybe they've got 3 officers working. And if something happens north of South Mountain, they have to go up there to respond. Prescott, which has a population of about 40,000, they've got a total of 65 cops on their department. We can fit the whole city of San Francisco in the Maryvale precinct with room left over. So those are some of the things that we're faced with. We're asking that the city staff, the police department at 2.5 officers per 1,000 population, which would give us a total department size of 4,000 officers, from the chief down to the lowest officer. That would, A, allow us to adequately staff patrol so we can cut down the response times on calls and actually have time to proactively patrol to deal with the problems that the gentleman over here was talking about earlier with the people at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning being out and about. And again, it would allow our detectives to get ahead of their caseload and actually solve crimes instead of just putting them in a file because they'll never get solved. You, the citizens, deserve better. So we would suggest that you contact the mayor and the city council and tell them that they need to find the funding to adequately staff the department in what everyone likes to proclaim as a world-class city, as the 6th largest city in the country. If anyone has any other questions, I have some handouts. I'll be more than happy to stick around and talk to you. Thank you.
We don't have enough police officers, but we can spend $256 million on the library and another $50 million to take it to Metro Center. It's disgusting and it's embarrassing.
Thank you, Franklin. Our next speaker is Dan Carroll.
You stole my thunder.
How you doing, Dan?
Good. How are
Good to see
you?
you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, neighbors. I really am here to speak on exactly that topic. First, thank you, Councilwoman, for your leadership, service, and responsiveness. It's been terrific, and I'm grateful. I thought we were, I was using 1.5 million population, so you're right, it's 4,000 if our population is 1.6 million. We stopped hiring police officers when the Great Recession began. We're now growing. I'm very privileged to serve on a village planning committee. My friend Justin, who was up here earlier, is on the planning commission. We're growing. That's fantastic. As we grow, we need to keep people safe. And so I think it's really important that the mayor and council use that national standard of 2.5 officers per 1,000 residents to staff us safely and get our response times down. And I really think that we're going to have to find the money somewhere. And we are starting to sell off excess city properties. It seems to me that the first place that should go is public safety. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dan, and thanks for your service on the village. Our next speaker is Martin Vogel.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, city staff members. My name is Martin Vogel, 6120 North 13th Place. I actually had a chance to speak 10 days ago at a budget hearing in Encanto Clubhouse. For 15 years, I've been an active neighborhood organizer, president of my neighborhood organization, Block Watch president for that period of time, and I've also served on 3 parks groups. My purpose in coming here tonight is, after having made a speech, basically endorsing the recommendations contained in this booklet, especially those for police and parks. I had a chance to go through City Manager Zurcher's budget. Actually, I found I was rather surprised by what was not mentioned in this report. Overall, the general fund budget is a $1.2 billion budget, $1,200 million. What we've talked about here is 1%, 12 million. I'd like to talk about some of the other issues, and if I read the reports correctly, we are in a difficult situation in spite of an improving economy, largely because this spring the city discovered it had to pay an additional $36 million in pension fund increases. 21 million of those go to the police department, 15 million to others. To compensate for that additional allocation of $36 million, severe cuts have to be made elsewhere. In reading that report, I was particularly struck by cuts in 4 areas that I think are significant. Just quickly, police. We've heard a lot about the police department. The cutbacks proposed include roughly $15 million in cuts and affect 127 sworn officers. Major cutbacks are proposed for the net enforcement teams, neighborhood enforcement teams. 56 sworn officers. In my neighborhood, we relied on those teams to keep people safe. Cuts are proposed for patrols. 45 sworn officers to save $5 million. Community action officers. Most of us active in neighborhoods know that community action officers are a critical element to turn people out and to magnify the impact of police. There's a proposal to cut 18 sworn officers from those community action officer groups to save $2 million. There are other cuts as well. In addition to the major cuts in the police department, affecting, as I said, 127 sworn officers, there are proposed cutbacks. We know that often the police departments are called in to help problems. Some of those problems are caused by young people. The parks and recreation cutbacks proposed affect 106 employees for $6.4 million. I was astonished to find that the proposal is to cut 16 of 42 Phoenix after-school programs. These are the programs that keep kids off the street, that keep them busy, that teach them things. It's the youth that are most affected. If they're on the street, they create more work for our police departments. Cuts are proposed for community centers as well. Teen centers, again, affecting, according to this report, 300,000 kids as a consequence of these cuts to the parks budget. Summer's approaching. It's already 95 degrees now. This summer, the proposal is to cut and close 11 of 29 pools to save $1.3 million. What do the kids do when they can't go to the pool? I know what I did when I was a kid, and it's not good. So again, keeping kids off the street saves police department time down the road. Those are major cutbacks. There are other cutbacks that you've already heard about. They cut library programs. They are cutting time available in the Burton Bar Library. And branch libraries are going to be shuttered. Our libraries are only open 40 hours per week in the branches. That's a pretty short week, especially during the summer when kids are free and out of school. The proposal is to cut those branches to 32 hours from 40. There just isn't enough time for kids to be busy, go to libraries, and be off the streets. Human Services, we've heard about the CAS program. There are other cuts to Chrysalis and other programs. Well, obviously, I think that most of us would like to keep those programs from parks, for the police department. The question is, how can we do that and pay for pensions at the same time? Actually, I do have a solution. In 2011, the city engaged a group of consultants called the Berkshire Group to write a report on police department efficiencies. In 2011, that group found that there were major inefficiencies, sadly to say, in the police department, largely due to the 4-day work week. I'm going to ask a question for the plea officer. I don't know how many police officers or city employees have a 4-day work week. Frankly, I know many of my colleagues would like a 4-day work week. It's convenient, but it increases inefficiencies in payroll by 42%. According to that Berkshire report in 2011, $70 million could be saved per year. Over a 5-year period, when we have not yet implemented that recommendation, and most other recommendations were implemented, we could have saved $400 million. Again, I would love to propose that the city, the staff, look at the Berkshire report to see if that is not an answer to paying for pensions as well as paying for vital programs, including parks, police, and human services. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm not sure, some of the things you quoted, like cutting the library hours, we're not doing, so I'm not sure if you have the most recent information. And so I might ask our budget representatives here just to make sure, thank you, that he has the most up-to-date, because we aren't, I saw everyone from the library, we're not shutting the hours.
I'm delighted to hear that. I hope the same is true for the police department cuts, but this came off
Yeah,
the
it is.
materials from the website.
So maybe
That's last year's budget proposal, that those cuts were not made.
So maybe if you could get with our budget
It says a 216 budget in order to remain within budget. 2016-17 budget on the website. But I'll do that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
please do. Thank you. I appreciate it. Our next speaker is Jenny Strickland. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman, for being here. So, hi everyone. My name is Jenny Strickland. I am a commissioner on the Phoenix Office of Arts and Culture, and I'm also the chair of the Emerging Arts Leaders of Phoenix. And so, you can probably guess I'm here to advocate for more funding for the arts. Just a quick anecdote about my life. I grew up in Phoenix, just a couple miles away. I attended school downtown, actually, at Arizona School for the Arts, and then I was lucky enough to receive some publicly subsidized education at Arizona State University. And over the course of the last 5 or 6 years after graduating, I've seen so many of my friends and peers leave the city, unfortunately, for cities that have more robust arts funding because they have more opportunity there. So I'm just making a humble plea for a little bit more funding for the arts and culture. It goes such a long way to help many of the different issues that have been discussed today, along with the library funding as well. That humanitarian funding does so much to keep folks off the streets, keep kids in school, and any additional funding helps in the grants program, helps to bolster new and emerging businesses, which young people open frequently in the arts. So just trying to get more of my friends to stay in Phoenix. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate you staying in Phoenix. I'm lucky both my kids did too. Both of my millennials still live here. Amy Williamson.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for hearing us today. I actually grew up in District 3, and both my sister and my parents still live in District 3. I'm now in District 7 near the State Fairgrounds. And I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but it's getting pretty hot out. And I am very concerned about the tree canopy. So my ask is to increase the per capita amount in Parks and Rec and maybe in the Streets Department to parks and also to trees. We have an issue with the urban heat island effect, and it would be really nice to have the multiple benefits that trees provide, including property value, mental health, obviously sequestering carbon, and even with the particulate matter, especially since we're so sprawled, it's nice to have an ability to have a nice walk down the street and have some shade that is produced by trees that provide so many benefits. And parks are super important as well. I've talked to the Phoenix Forester who says that they could really use more funding for maintenance specifically, because I think a lot of people see that a lot of the trees are not pruned well, and it would be really nice to have more capacity to support such an important infrastructure that lasts for years. So thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Our next speaker is Sean Sweat. Welcome.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I chair the Central City Village Planning Committee and also lead the Urban Phoenix Project. And something that we've noticed is that downtown has a lot of growth going on, a lot of apartment buildings going up, people who live in these apartment buildings, and some of them condos, but mostly apartments, don't have yards. And in that type of environment where people are walking, biking, and taking transit a lot more than they're driving often, particularly when they don't have yards, what people in these environments rely on are public green spaces. And they don't have to be large. Not like, we're talking just maybe the size of this room even, sometimes smaller. But the issue is that they have to be frequent. So, because when you're walking around 4 blocks, 5 blocks is some people's limit on how far they can walk, particularly in the summer heat when the urban heat island is heating up. So I looked into what different cities do for their parks. Phoenix is spending, this is according to the 2016 Public Land Trust, I think was the name of it. They did research on people's budgets, and Phoenix spent, for the budget year they're looking at, about $80 per capita. Austin spent $90 per capita. Las Vegas, which I don't usually think of as someone who can best us, but they spent $140 per capita. Atlanta spent $150 per capita, and that wasn't even the top. I mean, it went much higher than that. I think Seattle was close to 300, but I don't think we can match that. So I think it's important to ask for maybe just $10 more per capita so we can catch Austin. We'll deal with Las Vegas and Atlanta another day. Maybe just $10 more per capita so we can catch Austin, create a couple small, this room at most, downtown parks and areas, because there are areas of downtown that don't have any green space, any public green space, to make sure that as it grows, as the population grows and as the density grows and these people don't have access to personal yards, that they do have access to some public green space, and we do maintain the livability and walkability and continue the densification of downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, and thanks for your service on your village. Our next speaker is Sharina Nash. ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you. I didn't know I was speaking, but now I am.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I'll speak.
I wanted to hear someone else speak.
This is my first time coming to a hearing, so I basically came to support what some of the other people have said about, the youth and having places for the youth to go, because in my neighborhood, I live in South Phoenix, it's becoming summer. There are a lot of youth out there, and they do need some place to go. And like you said, when you do some of the budget cuts and they don't have a place to go, they're more likely to get into trouble. There's a lot of parents out there that work late and they don't have any place for their kids to go, and it would be nice for them to go to, some of the youth centers and focus some of that negative energy on something positive. So, another thing was our streets. They're pretty bad, especially in the South Phoenix area. And if any of you travel down Baseline Road in rush hour traffic, it takes longer than normal to get from, 2 miles up the road. It might take you 30 minutes. So that's something that I would like to see change is, the commute down some of these roads and some of the road conditions. So.
Thank you. You did a great job. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I put you on the spot. We have one other speaker card. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time with the printing here. Harold, and I don't know if you want to speak or not because it wasn't marked, but... Oh, Harold. Is it BR or BK? I'm sorry, I couldn't... I apologize. Thank you. Oh, you are? Well, thank you for your volunteer work here at the center. We appreciate it.
One thing that I think maybe the city should do is get some of these homeless people out of our city parks, and the ones that are not doing drugs, give them housing, and also, give them like a part-time job. Maybe they can help the city by picking up trash and stuff. And I think there's another thing that they can do too is the ones that are doing like he said, the ones that are doing dope, tell them if you don't get help, we'll basically put you away. Now I think there's another thing that they can probably do too is like parts like our schools, parts of music in the schools. I think they need to get that back in the schools with the kids. Because I think if they are learn to play a musical instrument, I think they won't be out there wandering the streets.
Thank you so much for your thoughtful comments. We have one more running up to speak.
Be careful.
Yeah. Oh, no problem. So Barbara Brown, welcome.
Thank you. Okay, I have 3 things very briefly I'd like to address. Well, I'm a senior and I'm also somewhat disabled because of a knee injury and balance problems. So sometimes I like to go to the Disability Center, and yesterday they had a workshop on seniors' disability and transportation, but I missed it. And the reason I missed it is because they gave me a free bus train pass on my mobile. They said you don't have to print it. No problem on the train. They have a little digital thing, and I got on the bus, and the man would not accept it. So I said, call your supervisor. He wouldn't accept it. So then I probably stupidly said, call the police. So he called the police. Eventually, they came 40 minutes later. So I missed my meeting, but the police were very nice. They drove me to my destination. It was only 6 blocks. I was 1 stop, but my knee isn't good, and I couldn't walk. And I'm thinking, why doesn't the one on the bus, he didn't have anything to see this mobile app? 2, if the police are called, why'd they take 40 minutes? I'm sure it wasn't a 911, but still. And the bus driver said, you're holding up the whole route. And I said, you're holding up the route. I'm here, I'm not getting off the bus. And I said, all right, now we don't care what I said, but I'd like you to look into that, please, about mobile apps. If an organization, for some reason, if I don't know if through the city or what, and the bus companies, I guess, Valley Transportation, a little better communication because it was pretty hot there. And most people would walk the 6 blocks because there's no stop at the Disability Center. It's Washington and 50th Street. You have to get off at 44th, where the airport is, or go to Priest. Now, the good news is I found out they are making a new stop. They're breaking ground soon. So they will stop at the Disability Center, which is very good. They have a great pool there. The bad news is going to be about 2 years. So what I'm asking the city to do is to think about, until that new stop opens, you have a circulator going back and forth on Washington from 44th to Priest, the 2 stops. Just, you can have one on each end and whatever you do. So it's too hot. We can't walk. We're stuck. The disability said call cab. I'm not calling cab for 6 blocks and I'm on unlimited income. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, getting to senior centers. They'll only let you go if you call Dial-A-Ride or whatever. They will transport you to the nearest. So I live in Sunny Slope. They'll take me here. But I'm sorry to say I do not like this one because it's way out of date. I try to get them to change it, get computers. I even went around the neighborhood to get donations of computers. They don't want to hear this. They said that the computer literacy or use is not part of their, quote, mission. I said, well, I think you're out of the wrong decade then, or the wrong generation. But they wouldn't listen. But if you go to the one on 28th Street in Indian School, they have a computer room connected to there. This doesn't even have a computer room. So I don't want to go here. But Dial-A-Ride, I don't have transportation now, will not take you. So I think you should look into the program where the senior could go to whichever one's best. Sometimes they go to the Chinese one, which is on Camelback, because they have great Tai Chi, and there's different senior centers for different needs, and seniors should not be limited to their community. And by the way, I'm starting a nonprofit organization called Sustainable Aging. What seniors have to know, I'm a retired lawyer, what seniors have to know to get the best for their buck. And I will be registering as a lobbyist, so all senior disabled issues, I will help there. And then the other thing for Sunny Slope, the park. Because I don't have a car, I walk slowly. I walk the neighborhood. It is a disaster. And I think that any politician in the state of Arizona, certainly in Phoenix, should have to, on their resume, say, I take the bus once a week or once a month. If you don't take the bus and you don't walk the neighborhood, you don't know the neighborhood. And when I walk up Dunlap across that park and I go diagonal, sometimes I can't get through the sidewalk because they're homeless, because of the carts and the clothes, and I feel awkward, so I walk across the street. It's desolate. There's no place really to stop and get a cup of coffee until you get to Grinders. And I lived in New York City for a long time, and I was born there, as you could probably tell. But they changed the park, Bryant Park, that had a nickname in a movie called the Panic in Needle Park. It was called Needle Park, the worst park in the country with drugs and everything. It's a completely changed. And even though I didn't like Mayor Giuliano, he did it right. Now they have free internet there, they have kiosks, they have tables, they have movies in the summer. They converted. And if New York City can convert the worst park in the city, someone could do something with Sunny Slope Park and also have a dog park, which will bring people out. People who, like me, who have a dog, I walk the street, you see what's going on here, very important. And then, so I recommend kiosks and things like that. And there's 1 or 2 other issues, but I'll leave it for another time, but thank you very much.
Thank you. And I don't know if anyone is here from public transit that we might be able to answer the question of the thank you. Maybe you can get with them. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. This was a pretty lively discussion. And we'll take all your comments and we'll go through them. And this, again, is a trial budget, and the city manager will come back to the council with recommendations.
I'm sorry, there was one other comment, but I think it's too late. I was thinking about the 29-story building that the city of Phoenix was going to give a $9 million tax to NF2, and I think they just did it today. But I want to say, I don't know why, and I was there at the beginning when Roosevelt District started, why anybody in Phoenix needs a 29-story residential, especially with 640 or so parking spaces. There's gonna be businesses on the bottom. There's 650 or so apartments. And if you have one car per apartment, you're not gonna have any parking. So I hope even though you voted for that tax rebate, what a benefit, that at least you look at the parking. Too little parking. Roosevelt's already too crowded.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So any other comments, Karen?
Just May 9th.
Yeah.
The revised budget will be presented to council on May 9th, and then it's scheduled for final action by the council, first action by the council on May 23rd. So please continue to provide your input. The web address is on the tabloid. You saw it earlier. And thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again.
You have been watching a community budget hearing held recently in Phoenix. For questions, comments, or ideas, please visit phoenix.gov or call 602-262-4800. You can also send feedback through social media by using #PhoenixBudget. This video can also be seen online at phoenix.gov/PHXTV or youtube.com/City of Phoenix AZ.